All right, we are live. Welcome, Antonio, to We Are in This Together.
How's it going?
Great. Let me introduce you.
Mm-hmm.
Antonio Cosme is an indigenous Coahuiltecan and Boricua writer, public speaker, entrepreneur, radical economist, educator, artist, beekeeper, and farmer from Southwest Detroit. Much of his
Yes.
work has been dedicated to lecturing, writing, and acting in opposition to the neoliberal assault on Detroit and water.
Mm-hmm.
His media, interviews, viral street art, blogs, and articles have been featured in movies, magazines, and newspapers. In 2015, Antonio was arrested for painting #FreeTheWater on a water tower in the midst of the Flint water crisis and Detroit shutoff crisis. Beyond just resisting the abuse of public goods, he founded Southwest Grows urban farm on land taken from Detroit residents by Banks. The space seeks to use agroecological and permaculture principles to reshape the broader urban ecology, connecting social movements with struggles for land reclamation and environmental justice. He also co-founded Black to the Land, a coalition organization of Black families that organizes camping and hiking trips. Currently, he works with the National Wildlife Federation, introducing Detroit high schoolers to outdoor experiences, hiking, hunting, and foraging across the state and region. He and 3 other beekeepers founded the Southwest Detroit Cooperative in 2016. Antonio works with Anishinaabe communities across the Great Lakes, locally in the Wawiawatunang,
Mm-hmm.
the indigenous name for Detroit, having organized with the Detroit indigenous community to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. With local Anishinaabe, Antonio helped initiate the #Detroit Sugarbush, producing maple sugar and syrup from Detroit trees. People can find more information about his creative work by searching #decolonize Detroit and his farm work #SWGrows and his bee work at #SWBetroit. I'm going to put all these hashtags on the screen later. We Are in This Together is an unscripted live nonprofit broadcast by Dearborn blog to have conversations that become oral history records of our lives during the COVID-19 pandemic, also known as coronavirus pandemic. These are personal stories of our lives during these unprecedented social isolation measures in a globalized world. Well, you know what? This has been the introduction since March 12, but so much has happened since then that
Yeah.
I feel the introduction is a little bit out of space. So, Antonio, as much as you can during the interview, try to look at the camera
Mm-hmm.
and not the screen. But anyway, you look. I'm excited about this interview.
Yeah.
I've known you for a very long time when we used to work together in Southwest Detroit, different community groups. You work closely with students also of Universal Academy, which I also used to work with. I know that you're everywhere, man, as far as Southwest Detroit, and
Mhm.
whenever it comes to social justice, environmental justice, I always see Antonio there. And this interview, we usually pick different individuals from different places of the world, and although you're considered a local, okay, so but we you know how in America there is such a level of segregation that sometimes
Mm-hmm.
the city that is next to you is as foreign as a country that is across the globe.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to shed light. I experienced that because of living, working in various cities, and just it feels like transforming from one age to another, from one word to another.
Mm-hmm.
And Southwest Detroit, man, has its own feel. It has its own spirit. You cannot get that spirit unless you live there, you work there, you congregate with the community there, and you it's not something that you can read about. It's something that you live. So
Mm-hmm.
let's start with that. Talk to us about Southwest Detroit.
Yeah. So It's a pretty expansive area. A lot of people confuse Southwest Detroit with Mexican Town. First, I have to say, my lip is a little bit inflated because I got stung in the face by a bee earlier today. I'm doing some beekeeping work earlier today.
Well, I hope you're feeling well. Some people pay for that, Antonio.
I feel well. I get stung like I feel like I average 1.7, 1.8 times every single time I work with the bees.
Yeah.
So it's normal. It's normal. But the face, I don't get it stung in the face a lot. So that's kind of like, it was huge earlier. I have a photo. It looks like,
wow,
it was just enormous.
Well, I'm glad you can do the interview. I mean,
yeah.
With that, but
I could have just wore the COVID mask and gotten away with it. You know, just to prove a point. Like, I'm alone in my house, but trying to be.
I was
in
saying
style.
Some people pay for that. You know.
Yeah.
Some people pay to get their lips larger. You know,
it's like a free bow tie or fillers.
It reminds me, we used to my grandmother in Bint Jbel, a small city in Lebanon, in a village well, it's a city, but it's a village to us in South Lebanon. She used to have bee hives in her farm. So we used to play a game as kids. You know how things change. You know, right now, like bee sting is a big thing. But at that time, we used to play a game. We all would line up in front of the beehive. What do you call the bee house? What do you call it?
Yeah, it's
the
a hive,
right?
It's a hive, yeah.
So we all stand in front of the bee farm, the beehive, and we count to 3 and we take one step closer, and we keep doing that. Whoever gets stung is out, and the last person standing is the winner. You know.
Yeah.
And that used to be a game. It's no longer funny today. Okay, yeah. So Southwest
kids need to be more resilient. That's for sure.
Right. Go ahead. You will tell us about Southwest Detroit.
Yeah. So it's and it was German, Polish before it was like Latino for sure. It was like it's a really expansive area. So it includes like Del Rey. Del Rey is like in 48217 is like where the super environmentally polluted areas of Detroit are. It's the industrial area. So Detroit's port is over there. The bridge to Canada is in that area. There's a lot of history in the area. Like that area used to be like, there was like jazz and like all sorts of like music and underground stuff. Like I think even like the Z gang, which is like that Jewish alcohol running gang, used to like operate down there. Detroit's, so that's just Del Rey area, super industrial. It's pretty abandoned right now. It's getting like leveled at the moment. Another area is like there was a village outside of Detroit called Spring Wells, and that's where a lot of Southwest Detroit is, like the center of the community, I would say, like the hub of it, which is like Patton Park, because Southwest Detroit's very wide. You know, on one end there's the industrial area, and on the other end there's the Mexican town, you know, which is like in Corktown, kind of ends at Corktown. And that Corktown area is like the affluent. There's really big, beautiful old homes. There's a major high school, one of the last public high schools in Southwest Detroit. Western International is over there.
Is
and that's kind of
considered part of Southwest?
You said what?
Detroit? Is it considered part of Southwest Detroit?
Mexican Town is for sure. Yeah, people confuse Mexican Town and Southwest Detroit a lot of times. But Mexican Town is like the furthest east neighborhood of Southwest Detroit. Right, and I kind of live in like an area in the northern. Some people don't even consider it Southwest, but it's like, I would call it the armpit of Detroit. There's like a weird like thing where Detroit goes 90 degrees up and then 90, like, you know, goes 9 degrees towards Dearborn. And I live right there in that border between Dearborn and Detroit.
Is that close to Wyoming?
It's
or down south.
Yeah, it's really close to Wyoming. I live like closer to Wyoming than Livernois, but off McGraw. So I'm like my light's fucking up.
No problem. Okay, Antonio. So
it's a big neighborhood. It's diverse. My area is like heavily Yemeni. There's Lebanese. Like I live in the most diverse area. It's almost like Hamtramck in my area. There's a lot of Yemeni, a lot of Polish, like just like Southern Appalachian, Mexican, Dominican. It's very, very diverse where I stay.
Where were you born, Antonio?
I live right in the same neighborhood where I grew up in, which is like the McGraw, Alano, Ford, Wyoming, Michigan, Livernois area.
What high school you went to?
So I went to K through 12 in Detroit, K through 12 in Catholic schools in Detroit. So I started off at, in grade school, I started off at like St. Cunegunda Then I went to St. Thomas Aquinas, and then for Catholic for my senior or for high school, I went to this high school that started in Redford. It started in Detroit, then it moved to Redford. Now it's in Novi, but it's called Detroit Catholic Central. It's an all guys private Catholic high school. Yeah, it was definitely outside my parents' budget to send us to high schools like that, but like they really scrimped and saved and sacrificed a ton of house, you know, in the midst of the crisis, just to send us to better schools, because they both went to Detroit public schools, and they didn't want us to have the experience. Unfortunately, with the segregation that comes with you know, the United States has been dealing with this since Brown versus Board of Education, like the inequality in education between Black and brown communities and white communities in the United States. And a lot of Black and brown communities like Detroit have like really, really underfunded education, no music programs, no sports programs, no like AP programs, no language programs. Like it's a lot of like defunding within that system. So I understand my parents' decision, but I do support DPS. You know, I think it's unfortunate. The district has gone from like 200,000 to like 50,000 in like the last like 20 years. And that's because of like there's 3 specific policies, but I could talk about education stuff. My background's in economics, but again, neoliberalism, as you mentioned, is like a big part of it. And you could see the history of it a little bit in my educational experience. Catholic schools were closing throughout Detroit at the same time that public schools were closing too, because they're competing with charter schools. There's another policy that allowed per pupil funding. So like suburbs were receiving, and then also open access. So suburbs started receiving Detroit students as well. So there's been like a flight of education money from the Detroit public school system. So I understand my parents' decision, but it was interesting because I grew up in the hood, and by my junior and senior year, I'll be spending time in like the wealthy western suburbs of Detroit with like the region's elite. There's a lot of like German, Irish, Catholic sort of roots in Detroit, and like within like even like Duggan's son was in my homeroom in high school. Mike Duggan's son, another one of my best friends. He was on the wrestling team with me. Cox, his dad is Judge Cox, who was like he was part of the water stuff in Detroit when Detroit was going bankrupt. He took over for Judge Fikens, and he was part of like what happened with the regionalization of the Detroit water system. There's just a lot of really rich kids. There's one of my buddies, another buddy, his dad was like FBI entry task force for Dearborn or something like that. He was like on SWAT in Dearborn. That got me off so many tickets. Living on the border of Dearborn and Detroit is really seriously like a Ferguson-like checkpoint of like anti-Black racism that still exists in the Dearborn-Detroit border. Speaking of that segregation, that you're talking about.
Right. Do you feel still exists today?
Oh yeah, for sure. I've been pulled over about a dozen times. Transiting in and out of that area or more.
Can you explain more? This is Dearborn blog, so this is the place to explain this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, well, obviously, like we all know that Dearborn has a long history of like anti-Black racism, especially when it comes to Detroit. With Orville Hubbard, which is the mayor of Dearborn for 60 years or so. He was a good mayor. Like he was not a bad mayor. There's just a ton of these type of like public leaders who grew up on Detroit's periphery, whose communities benefited as Detroit declined. And they all have this like oppositional stance to Detroit because of, again, that stark patterns of segregation really enforced like super sharp racial divisions in the area. Detroit remains the most segregated metropolitan area in the country to this day, especially if you include Detroit and Ann Arbor. Especially you look at Oakland County, the average income of Oakland County is like $80,000 a year. There's like some neighborhoods in Oakland County, just north of Detroit, like 4 or 5 miles, where the average income is like $360,000 a year. The average income of Detroit is like $26,000 a year. So there's like vast economic differences in like what people have and and like there's a lot of other things that are like really fucked up, and particularly with the legal stuff when we're talking about the police. At any given time, like 1/3 of Detroiters like have warrants out for them for like minor traffic violations and more serious stuff too. Even marijuana stuff back in the day, but like that's obviously no longer less a thing. 1/3. There's like I think something like, and I might be a little off in the stats. It's something really really high. Like I think 1/4 of Detroiters have cars, and like a huge percentage of those don't have car insurance because it's so expensive. It's mandatory. My car insurance is like $4,000 a year.
Wow.
It's like worth more than some people's cars. It's crazy.
Right.
And if you don't have it, you're heavily criminalized. You end up in jail a lot. There's a lot of people in jail for that in Detroit. So when it comes to like checkpoints, this is even like there's mirrors of Israel and Palestine in there too. Like there are checkpoints when it comes to like heavily racialized, segregated areas, and Dearborn and Detroit border is one of them. Obviously, Dearborn has become incredibly diverse and grown so much and come such a long way. And I'm really excited to see like Arab leaders and different things like that. I love Dearborn in a lot of ways, but I also grew up with this like fear of the border as a young person. And then in high school, I was liberated from that fear because a little bit of white privilege from going to the expensive kids school rubbed off on me. And I was able to say, hey, this is the cop I know who works here. Like I got off of so many tickets that way. It's crazy. So many. Like that. I mean, there's situations where I had guns pulled on me multiple times. I've been like put in the back of cars. They asked me if I'm like an American, if I'm a citizen in this country or not. Worse. In border situations, I've had my asshole touched by cops. Like messy, dehumanizing things happen all the time on the border when it comes to Black and brown folks traversing into some of these communities around Detroit.
Do you feel there's an improvement, or it's still the same, or?
I definitely like you. It's impossible to say there's not some improvement. I'll say this though, like I think when it comes to like this is such a big question. It's impossible to like parse it out, and like there's definitely been improvements over my lifetime, over the arc of everything. But I'll say this, like for the last 11 years, I'm pretty sure it's 11, the infant mortality rate for Black women in Detroit has gone up, has gotten worse.
Right.
So like I think that there's been a level of deprivation among the bottom of the socioeconomic groups that's made it really bad and desperate in very recent times. Yeah. And like when we talk about this conversation about reparations, this is a big controversial topic, reparations, but like we still need reparations from the 2008 financial crisis. Like that fucked Detroit. I'm allowed to say that. Sorry, like I cuss. That messed Detroit up.
Time, so you're fine.
That messed Detroit up a lot. The 2008 financial crisis was like horrifying. Literally 50% of all Black wealth across the entire country disappeared in a matter of like 8 years. All like 50% of Black wealth. The wealth disparity between white people and Black people is 10-1. The wealth disparity, the income disparity is not as bad. But it's brutal. I mean, like in Detroit is like just this hyper version of all of these problems in America. This post-industrial sort of situation we have here. I mean, it's been interesting. I mean, as Detroit's gotten better, I would say like if we were judging by like infant mortality of women, Black people are not doing better. Black people are trending down if you measure by that. But there's other measurements that you
Amnesty
can,
International
there's other measurements, like
Amnesty International has taken that as a human rights issue. And and they brought, I remember I was part of Group 78 in downtown.
Yeah.
And when we had delegations to state representatives and senators, we brought that issue to light, and many of them were surprised that we have that issue in the United States.
I was part of bringing the United Nations to Detroit with the Detroit People's Water Board, which is an organization that was started by Charity Hicks, this amazing environmental organizer in Detroit history. Definitely look her up if you're interested in that sort of culture. But she had started this organization, and we were obviously like opposing the shutoffs that were happening in Detroit en masse. And when those happened, and around the time of the Flint water crisis, we did bring the United Nations over. We did a tour. We stopped in a bunch of different places and showed them, people were experiencing this sort of problems. But there's I mean, I love Detroit because there's so much history you can find in Detroit. Like part of it is just the water infrastructure. The government has like literally like radically decreased the amount of like the percentage of public infrastructure projects that are paid for by the federal government has radically gone down in the last like 40 or 50 years during this like kind of neoliberal era that we're in. And it's just on local communities and entrepreneurs or whatever, to like pay for public infrastructure now. It's absolutely nuts. I mean, Detroit in Michigan is like, if there was a case for like burgeoning fascism in the Midwest, like it was Governor Snyder. You know, like that administration like literally took away the democracy of 50% of the black people following the 2008 financial crisis period. I mean, they were doing some radical stuff. I mean, that's what resulted in the Flint water crisis ultimately, was this like right wing sort of like, I mean, it was before Snyder, you know, like it's
I know it's
vibrations
a
from
topic.
Reagan, you know, Reagan,
A
post
topic
Reagan, Reagan
you're
and beyond is
talking
just
about
like
the
a
whole history. I know it's all
horrible era in
connected.
American history. It's like
There,
the decline, you know, the United States, once we beat Russia, we don't have an answer to Bretton Woods. That's ultimately the question. Are you familiar with Bretton Woods?
no.
There's a major conference in the 1940s after World War II when the United States essentially took the reign of like, we are the #1 global economic power. We have the strongest Navy. And the deal was, you help us fight communism, we'll patrol the world's oceans, and we'll make sure that like all of your shipments get to where they need to go. Because previous to this, especially during the World War I and II periods, Europe had been fighting for like 500 years or some shit. And like, you literally need to have a navy in order to be an economic power, a global power. And there are only certain countries that were doing that. So like the navy aspect was huge. But I mean, that's like, I forgot where I was going with that.
Okay.
I had some wine at dinner.
We're gonna touch on a lot of subjects today.
Yeah.
Although this interview is personal, I'll try as much as I can.
Yeah,
to
I'll
bring
keep
it
it.
back.
I'll keep it unpersonal, but I'll tell you personal stuff too.
No, I
Tell you
mean,
personal stuff too.
Stephen, you're one of the most active people that I know. I am a person who's infuriated by the amount of need of activism and
Yeah.
the amount of time wasted by the masses of people. And one of the things I liked Corona for, because we're going to come back to Corona, one of the things I like Corona for is it stopped sports for a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
let these people take a break and
Yeah.
maybe find something else to do.
More people have been gardening than ever. I love that. I
Yes,
love
and
that. I love
baking.
everyone's food security is a big question in people's mind, as it should be. You know, as it really should be. I mean,
Right.
just with climate change alone, let alone coronavirus.
Okay, so for the record, this is something that we do every episode. Today is July 7th, 2020. The number of confirmed cases in the world is about 12 million. In the United States, about 3.05 million. And in Michigan, it's 73,400.
The world is 12 million and the US is 3.5.
Yeah, the US is now is 25% of the total.
I think one of the problems here is like the third world's not getting tested. I think that's also one of the issues for sure, because it's definitely spreading out in those places, but you're just not going to hear about it. They have no money for testing.
Yeah, I
They're
can't.
just going to die.
This is a cluster mess.
It's a total mess. I mean, the
Right.
epidemiology is so raw and so new. It's really difficult to like parse out what's on point and what's
And
like
worse than that, it's
measurement
politicized.
problems.
The measurements have been politicized, so it is
Oh
very
my gosh,
difficult.
yeah, and like they're for a while the government was like, the insurance companies were paying extra for corona and is incentivizing classifying other stuff as corona. I think like one of the good statistics for us to really find out is like watch lung deaths year to year, like respiratory deaths, which in corona is included in. You know, I think that would be good to like a way to better measure the actual impact of it. I think we're gonna have to get creative with the epidemiology in order to like
Okay, I want to ask you about Southwest.
quantify
I
this time
interviewed,
period.
Hanan Yahya. I
Yeah.
interviewed her before, and I asked her about Southwest situation as far as Corona. I'll ask you too, but before that, I want to tell you that recently, I think a few days ago, Rashida Tlaib, who's from Southwest Detroit, I don't know who she represents now. Does she represent Southwest Detroit?
Yeah, part of it. I think
Yeah,
she's like District 13 or something like that. They
right.
may, depending how the census goes, they may force
She's
her, erase her
Southwest, right?
district.
I've
Yeah.
always thought she's Southwest
I
Detroit.
think she's part Southwest. Let me look at her.
She
Let me look
used
it
to
up.
mentor our student government at Universal, by the way. Uh,
Really?
Southwest, so Rashida Tlaib, she got a $1.5 billion fund for water, which is very happy news. She's a hard worker for social justice, and that was a very, very good accomplishment.
Yeah, she's been a powerhouse. So
Okay,
her
so
district is, no, it's not Southwest Detroit or Dearborn at all. It's Highland Park, Hamtramck, Detroit, Harper Woods, Grosse Pointe,
oh really? Okay,
Grosse Pointe Park. Wow. That's
Yeah,
wild.
I didn't know that. I assumed she's Southwest for some reason.
That's where her strength is, but she's all over the place.
Right.
Jesus.
Maybe when she was a state
Oh,
representative.
hold on. They said District 13. What is this?
It's a shame
No, it
guess
includes Southwest
to guess
Michigan.
to guess
Michigan
like that why
Congressional
we have
District
the
13.
internet. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I think she actually does have Southwest. I take it back. I think
right.
that was
This
something
is how
else.
live these episodes. Like we don't really prepare.
Yeah,
Okay. So
I'm
Antonio,
prepared. I took some notes. I answered your question on a note.
thank you. What is the situation of the coronavirus in Southwest Detroit as you have witnessed it?
Um,
First, are you safe? Your family, people around?
yeah. I've seen a couple. I've seen like friends of friends.
Uh-huh.
People die. There's like people acquaintances of mine who have passed. Um, I think I've heard of a lot of people being very distant from elders, and it's a really pernicious bad disease. You know, it's really it's been rough for people. I think, but um, I think one of the problems in Southwest is it's hard to quantify because a lot of the people are outside of the medical and insurance system. There's a lot of undocumented people. There's people who just don't have health insurance. So
They
I've been
talk
like
about
involved in like diaper delivery. I know there's a lot of people who need diapers. I know poverty's amazing. Poverty is one of the biggest things. The economy is stopped and slowed down, shut down. So a lot of people are very, very broke. Um, I think like Detroit as a city's unemployment rate's crazy high, like 60% or 50, some really, really high number.
yeah, and
Um,
someone might ask who is not aware of the situation. He'll ask you, why don't they find jobs? Why don't they work?
well,
So
there
let's
there
talk
is no
about some of
jobs right
the
now. The economy is like crazy.
right. Let's talk
Um,
about some of the obstacles. Let's talk about public transportation in Detroit.
yeah, there. I mean, I'll give you an example that's like I think a good representative. Let's say that. So there was a big grant that Detroit had for developing a bus rapid transit system, which is probably the most efficient thing for Detroit with a limited budget that we have. Um, and I think like I want to say it was Kresge or Knight, one of these. I think it's Kresge and Dan Gilbert got together and they used that money to help develop the Q line, which is like
From Midtown to downtown.
from Midtown to downtown. It was like a lot. I wrote an article about this, but there's a lot of people don't know. Like while they're building that, they're also like installing like some of the core cables to rocket fiber, which is the fiber optic internet sort of system. Which like obviously the medical stuff down to downtown up to Midtown is like where you would want rocket fiber. It's because essentially Dan Gilbert bought up all of the property around Quicken or around the train line
Right.
downtown, all of the buildings during the
And
crisis.
Q Line is a Quicken Loans company too.
Well, they helped sponsor it, yeah. So
Mhm.
while he was doing that, he put in this rocket fiber and he bought all these buildings, some of which he got for free actually, giveaways during the economic crisis. That's what happens. They give away to rich people the crisis, who people who caused the crisis. He a huge percentage of the loans that he gave to Detroit, he was a mortgage originator. That's what Dan Gilbert is. Huge percentage of the loans that they gave to Detroit ended up being bankrupt. People losing their houses. They were predatory loans that were initiated from him. So he's a predatory lender. On the back end of the 2008 financial crisis, he, despite being a failed organization in business, gets to buy up all these buildings downtown. Some of them, like I said, he got for free, just transferred over from the city by working directly with the emergency manager, which was appointed by Snyder, as I referred to the fascism of Michigan earlier. And that guy got to like decimate union contracts, erase people's pensions, sell off public assets. He was essentially the government in Detroit for 2 years, and then Duggan took over. Yeah,
Do
it's
you feel
crazy.
that a lot of people in Metro Detroit, they see the transformation in Detroit as a positive thing?
Of course, yeah.
And,
I mean,
and
if you include Metro Detroit, it's like a 5 million people area. The city's 700,000.
uh-huh.
Um, I think
How would you
people
wish?
feel
How would you
safer.
wish that happened?
A
How
lot
would
of
that
people.
happen better?
Yeah, no doubt. That's a really important question. Um, there's like so like there's the the realpolitik, which is like given the circumstances, and then there's like the lofty idealistic, like what should society be doing. So I don't know which answer you want. If I'm gonna go with the realpolitik of what's happening in Detroit, and what happened in Detroit is, whoever, like, it would have been nice if like a populist leader took over the city at that time and like said, no, we're going to hold the banks accountable, because Detroit, out of almost every city, had almost a better case to really truly hold the banks accountable as a municipality. If we had prosecutors in power who were actually willing to pursue those cases against the banks, literally, the judge who was over Detroit's bankruptcy case, he literally said it in court that Detroit actually had one of the best cases to like take all these banks to task, yet we're giving up their pensions to pay them. So like, in the ideal situation, in the realpolitik, you really could have potentially had a leader who's like, you know what, like Greece, kind of like, fuck you, EU, like, it's possible to have a leader who would pursue the banks harder. I think that would have had a huge, I mean, most of cities' incomes come from the property values in the United States. It's a huge percentage of city urban incomes come from property values. And when the 2008 financial crisis happened, Detroit is like, a lot of people think it's a big city. It's a big flat ass lot, like worker.
Yep.
It's like a suburb city almost. It's like flat, it's not like Chicago where it's like 2-story buildings and commercial developments below them. We have like little corridors of business where there's like commercial development. We have our industrial area, but Detroit's largely a huge auto worker, residential fucking setup. Sorry, I'm cursing too. I had a wine at dinner and just cursing like a sailor. This is going on the record in Dearborn.
Okay. I can't beep anything. I don't have the technology for it, so
yeah,
whatever. They'll figure it out.
No, but you asked about transportation originally, and the public transportation system is really bad. You wait for like 2 or 3 hours to go somewhere that's like 20 minutes away. Sometimes buses don't come. It's also massively underfunded. There's a regional system.
I tried to go for a week without a car and just using public transportation.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't last, man. The bus driver didn't even expect a person waiting for them, so that was an issue. Like,
I hate to like harp on race always, and I think that's what annoys European people, but the reason we don't have a good bus system is because the suburbs want to keep Black and brown people out. If we were any other major city, we'd have a bus that goes to the suburbs, that goes to all these areas, that like transit the entire 5 million person metro area. But they have it's gone on the ballot the last like every 2 years repeatedly, and it fails every time because the Oakland County people really don't want poor $26,000 average a year people coming into their neighborhoods. But we have to get to their neighborhoods because that's where the jobs are. We're cleaning their homes, we're feeding them, we're working in their stores, and like you could see it. Just come in and out of Detroit every day. Right. There's a huge like traffic jam of people coming in who live in the suburbs, who work downtown, and Detroiters leave to work in the suburbs to fulfill like low wage jobs.
Were you, Antonio? Were you with the Detroit transportation proposal that was proposed a few years ago, and then it failed? I'm
not even sure which one you're talking about. I think I'm all for public transportation. Obviously, during the Corona, it's really difficult to be.
Yeah.
During Corona, it's very difficult to be a public transportation advocate because it's like the individual lifestyle of America is the best for not transferring your diseases to other people. But I mean, I feel bad for folks in New York. I mean, it's really bad there because in which is because they have such a good mass transit system compared to us. Right. So that's a big problem for sure. I mean, but this whole year is crazy.
Going back, one of the reasons for the high rate of unemployment in Detroit is because one of the reasons is because there's difficulty in transportation. If you don't have a car, and it's almost impossible to have a car with the insurance rates, if you don't have a car, it's very difficult to find public transportation that will take you to your job. There are articles written about that. In the newspaper is one that was written before, a guy who walks 8 miles so he can get to his job. So
there's also a big thing about the general transition with the economy to the service sector as opposed to industrial, and that like really affected Detroit more than anything else. The white flight, which is the population going from 2 million in the 1950s down to 700,000 in 2010, was like a huge vacuum suck of money into the suburbs, and which really allowed white people to build intergenerational wealth off of like cornfields that were out there. And black and brown people weren't allowed access to that wealth. So there's, again, a repeated instance of this like dispossession of black and brown wealth, and like the government supporting white people, European people, settlers.
Okay.
It's a repeat history in America.
All right. I'm going to ask you a few questions about some of the works that you do. There's a lot of them. And also, I want to get to the recommendations, because that's an important part of the program, so people can get exposed outside their bubble, right?
Yeah.
You don't really get exposed to. So I want to hear, like, what film do you recommend? What books do you read? Others can get exposed to them. But before that, I have something, maybe it's a surprise to you, but I only picked the public photos that you have. I want you to comment about these photos. Tell us what you're doing, or what the heck you're doing. Okay.
Yeah, so I work for the National Wildlife Federation, and we started this Detroit Sugarbush project with the local Native American community, where we tapped maple trees and boiled it down to make maple syrup and maple sugar. And this is me in my kitchen filtering the last of the maple syrup and bottling it up. And obviously not a commercial setting.
Awesome. Where can we get this maple syrup from?
You can't. I'm going to be selling Native American maple syrup from a friend, but like we can't sell it. One of the deals with the city, we wrote an MOU with the city to get permission. And one of the things that they asked us to do is like not to sell our products. So we can only give them away. And we give them away to Native American elders and community, and also people who come and work the Sugarbush. So if you come and work the Sugarbush, you can get a little taste.
Okay, maybe we will one day.
Yes.
Who's done that? Who's done that, Antonio?
That was me. I put an X. I used a door hinge to duct tape an X to Christopher Columbus's face downtown.
And that's not this year. Tell them which year is this.
This was 2015, maybe 2015, or could be 15, I think.
It took 5 years for him to die, but you got him at the end.
I did. We did. It was a lot of people. I'm very proud. That was tempura paint. It washed right off. It was very easy, very quick. If you see on his shoulder, I left tape. I left the Gorilla tape on his shoulder.
Okay.
I like, if I'm getting paid by a product, I love that Gorilla tape.
And Antonio, some people do not understand this sentiment. Can you please explain?
Yeah, we've had talks about this. We've had a ton of talks about this. Christopher Columbus is like the English American, like, so like every country builds its own history. Every country is like chooses its own history, and it tells history in a way that builds a national identity. And English, white, settler, American is the national identity of the United States. We are a Puritan nation who escaped the oppression of Europe and settled in these Native American lands and conquered our way from sea to shining sea. And Christopher Columbus, he wasn't the first European even to come to the continent, but his name is actually Cristobal Colon. He's Genoan, which is like, Italy wasn't even a thing. Italy didn't even exist when Christopher Columbus existed. So he's a Genoan, which was like one of the major trading communities along southern Italy. And he actually was a person who worked for Spain. So his Cristobal Colon is what the Spanish called him. Christopher Columbus is the anglicization of this person who was Genoan, who didn't call himself Christopher Columbus. So like, essentially, like, you cherry pick one person who's like the representative who we can identify with our American names to be the initiator of this great land, this country. So Christopher Columbus landed in Puerto Rico, and that's where my ancestry is, in those islands, the Arawak and Taino Indian people. And obviously I have Spanish ancestry as well. So like, yeah, it's partially me. I'm part of the colonizer class too. But they came to the island, and he would chop off hands to get gold. He would rape and sell women. He would enslave the people, massacred them, ran them out, and initiated the transatlantic slave trade from the west to Africa. He himself did that in a matter of 10 years in Puerto Rico before it hit the United States. It's like there's a huge African diaspora all across South and Central and Northern America, not just the United States. And a bigger percentage went to South and Central America and Latin America. And a lot of them came through the Antilles, or those islands that were initially colonized by Christopher Columbus. So if we're trying to change the narrative or give a narrative that's more inspiring for a recently occupied urban municipality such as Detroit, I think we shouldn't be honoring terrible people in public places and perpetuating like inaccurate myths. The myth is that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 and discovered America. But that's not accurate. That's not that. This man would never call himself this. Much less would he. He actually kind of like died disappointed because he thought he went to India. He was like kind of a failed. He ended up being like having a lot of debt. He died in like jail or something like that. He didn't have a good end of his life. Again, it's a cherry picked figure in history. And this is my debate with you. We have this disagreement because you compare the taking down of statues to ISIS, and I totally disagree, because a lot of the statues that are being taken down across this country are not historical figures. They're actually people who were cherry-picked from Confederate history during the big waves where African-American people were making big strides. So during the civil rights movements, Southern people warned Black people by putting up these monuments, basically monuments to white settler like violence towards Black and brown people. That's what these monuments represent. So they're literally the opposite of ISIS. ISIS put these statues up. American right-wing like nationalism is the same thing as ISIS. Like all of those like evangelicals who will betray their faith to support Donald Trump because they think he's the second coming of God, and he's like putting the capital of Jerusalem in Israel so that like the next reckoning can come, who believe the United States and the world's 6,000 years old. Like this is American ISIS. And those are the people, those are the class, those are the culture of people who put up a lot of these like anti-Black racist Confederate statues. Majorly, when did they go up in history? There are two big spikes in which these Southern statues started going up. One happened in the late, I think it's like 1890s, late 1800s. What was the big historical thing that was happening in that time, Wissam? What do you think it was? It was after the Civil War.
Right.
Reconstruction is the answer to that. Literally after the Civil War, the North occupied the South and said, we're going to force racial equality on the slave-holding societies. And that's literally what happened. Black and brown people began to prosper. There was like 2,000 Black politicians elected all over the South. They began to take the skills and knowledge that they had learned and acquired and even brought with them from Africa to start businesses and to become successful. And after, I think it was McKinley, he left government. It was the same thing that Biden represents, the same thing that Bill Clinton represents, which is the Southern strategy, which is like, kind of going for that Southern vote. That same class of people, this original Southern strategy guy got in office and said, we're going to end Reconstruction. And a huge wave of anti-Black violence swept over the South. Black people were lynched, killed. There's a huge amount of lynchings in that same time period. In that exact same time period, all of these statues started being erected all over the place.
Yeah.
ISIS erected those statues, the American ISIS. And the American ISIS supports Donald Trump right now.
Yeah.
So to say that the left and my people who are taking these statues down, indigenous people, are erasing history and taking down statues is totally inaccurate and totally centers European settler history.
Great. And I'm happy that you've recorded this whole commentary by the person who has himself done that. I actually love this work because it's an artistically representative work. And it reminds me of the work of Banksy, which is very, very accurate in its depiction and in its messaging.
Banksy got in trouble in Detroit the same time. Not Banksy. It was not Banksy. It was the guy who did Obey. With Obey, he's another prominent street artist, but he was doing a bunch of work in Detroit at the same time. we got busted for that free the water one.
Which I'll talk about in a minute. But just as a comment, because sometimes on Facebook communication is not clear. I'm not.
Yeah.
You see, I wanted you to explain your perspective, because people come from different perspectives. They have passions for different things. So we have been traumatized in the Middle East by extremists who took, first of all, in classical.
Who's supporting those extremists right now? Who is? Say it. Say who are the three countries supporting them?
The United
The
States,
three power centers:
Saudi Arabia,
Israel, the United States, and the Gulf states.
Right. So
Bad.
These in the classical Islam, sculptures are forbidden because Islam came to combat
The
paganism.
icons.
Exactly. So there's no iconography.
The Prophet Muhammad would never.
Whatsoever. There's no iconography in Islam. There's no symbols. Even the crescent and the star has nothing to do with Islam. That's something that Ottomans have taken over from Constantinople, from Istanbul. It was the symbol for the city, and they took it over. And he saw a dream and stuff. It's a long story.
Yeah. So the end of Ottoman rule was really the beginning of this national period for Arab peoples, and that's been a hot mess. That's falling apart right now.
Yeah. I have a series coming up called The Arab Identity, 20 episodes.
Do you like Nasser?
Yes, but there is footnotes.
Yeah, so many footnotes.
We'll get to that. But I just wanted to say that so we got traumatized by extremists making the decisions to remove statues because they deemed them offensive to their.
That was horrible. I mean, so was the burning of the libraries and stuff that happened under Desert Storm. I mean, all these things are horrible things that were initiated by the U.S.
Exactly, and same as the abolition of historical houses in Detroit, and the pipelines, like you stated before, right?
Yeah.
The pipelines which wipe
Native
out
American sacred lands and spaces and reservation communities, even the places. Native people have been limited to this much space they've been given, and they're trying to put pipelines across a bunch of it.
Right. So the danger is you can do this, and I can agree with you to do this, but like yesterday they vandalized Frederick Douglass sculpture.
I mean, that was definitely not Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, definitely. But
no, it wasn't them. It wasn't them. It was like right-wing crazies.
That's what I'm saying. Definitely, it's not them for sure. But what we're doing is we want these sculptures have been placed by city councils. There's been, some sort of a democratic process to placing them.
I mean, most of the time it's not a democratic process. Straight up, sometimes it's just gifts. It's just one community gifting a huge statue to a city.
But there is a democratic way of removing them. I'm just against.
Yeah. I mean, we got city council to support a resolution that actually called for the statue to be removed, and nothing happened. It took people ripping it down in Minnesota for Duggan to be like, oh shit, I don't want to be the mayor who got his statue ripped down. That's literally why. And then me and my boy David Pitawanakwat, shout out to David. He's from reservation in Manitoulin Island, and we hung a sign on Columbus's neck that said rapist, murderer, blah blah blah, and then it said in Anishinaabemowin language, which is in the native language of this land, it said, tell the truth or we will.
I think I have it here. Where is it?
The sign hanging from his neck? No, that's my phone.
No, we're coming to that, but no, I have that one.
Yeah.
That's when it was after the removal.
Yeah, so after it was taken down, I read an article, and I went straight there to just take a seat on it.
Which is a victory. You see, that I don't mind that. I don't mind the democratic process, but then because some people are calling for the removal of other statues, we're going a little bit.
Well, I think we're gonna go through a democratic process and get them removed. I think that's what's gonna happen. I think we're gonna use our democratic process, and if that's the case, so be it. Good, great.
Exactly, because if the democratic process decides to remove a sculpture and I don't like it, I can go to another country, but that's democracy. But for us
I'll say this real quick though, we don't have democracy in the United States. We've never had democracy in the United States. It's really a falsehood to call our system a democratic. It's truly if we wanted to idealistically talk about our program, it's a representative republic. But if we want it, or a constitutional like republic, but realistically, what it is according to Harvard, it's a oligarchy. I mean, it's really like just a massive oligarchy. With the inequality is absolutely crazy. It's like the Gilded Age. It's like the 1920s right now.
Sure, as long as we have corporate funding for campaigns, then we can't be at
As long as we have private foundations doing the things that government should be doing, such as mental health and taking care of our sick and stuff like that.
So again, so this is, I think this is the differences in the way. That was I'm very afraid of mobs doing stuff because I've seen the worst of it. And whether I agree or disagree, there are some sculptures that I would agree with removing, like the Confederate sculptures. And there are ones that I would disagree with. There are ones that I would interpret differently.
Well, it's like we should talk about that as a nation. You know, the national narrative should be discussed as a nation and revisited. You know, we have the right to change our narrative as a nation. You know,
right?
And I think we get the glimmers of hope, but we're kind of, the whole world is kind of quickly descending into like right-wing fascism. The whole world, Europe, everywhere.
Antonio with us also is the guy who painted Free the Water on the tank in Lansing, which became an international symbol of resistance and of demand of social justice. So thank you, Antonio, on behalf of every person who cares about social justice, for sacrificing and doing that. That was vandalism, but that was a very well-deserved vandalism with a very strong message. So I want to say that sometimes, like you said, you know, you go through the democratic process and then it doesn't have an end. Then you have to push the message somehow. With causing the least damage, and you've done that every time I've seen you do something. So it's not, I have nothing that I don't support that I know that you've done.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Tell us about this, Antonio.
So one of the things that got me into activism and organizing was my experience in college. It's a unique place, you know, a unique time in your life. Living on college was I took out crazy loans, and I think it's so unfair that people have to do that, and it shouldn't be like that, because it just, like, you know, enslaves you to whatever, you know, debt system we're running here right now. But the sort of free open space that I had in college to experiment and learn, and I worked for the Center of Multicultural Affairs. We developed diversity programming. I was president of the Latino Students Association. That's where I started opposing Columbus Day, was in events that we did. I did my first piece of public art on campus at Eastern Michigan University about Columbus, literally. And we also did it about war and about other issues. We took over some public walls in the school. I was on different leadership groups. I traveled to Latin America, where I learned about the United States relationship with that place. I got into student government, and I kind of, between Latino Students Association and student government, I had developed a relationship with a lot of Latino people, which connected me with the DREAM Act, which is a big problem, a big issue, which is like undocumented youth, people who entered the United States without paperwork as babies, came to the United States and were hoping to, you know, be a part of this country, you know, and be a part of the system. And that's what the DREAM movement was. And I was arrested in solidarity with the coalition against the Coalition for Tuition Equality in Ann Arbor. And we had a similar coalition called Dare to Dream EMU. And we had a action where we got arrested downtown. And we actually got these universities to change their policies to allow undocumented people to pay in-state tuition. So I have a couple of like victories with the system, you know, like these statues. And I got a law on the books in Ypsilanti. We actually changed the charter and constitution to make marijuana not like a criminal issue. So I've been engaged in activism since college, and that's what this picture is. It's like I started growing out my hair, and I started engaging in more radical activism. I was opposing my college at the time for backing the EAA, which we call the Educational Apartheid Authority, which is this institution which took the bottom 15% of Detroit public schools and fast-tracked them into charter school privatization, and it's a total failure. So much scandalous theft in that situation. It was a total total wreck of a situation. But yeah, so it's connects a lot of issues: education, immigration.
Antonio, there's no limit to the topics that we want to talk about, really, because you are, we say in Arabic, ummatun fi rajul. You are a nation in a person. Um, and it's a message that I wanna pass through you to our audience, to the youth, to history when it watches us again, that a person can create so much change, but it has a toll. Antonio has sacrificed a lot and has dedicated his life for his cause. It takes a lot of work. If there are more activists, a lot of change can happen. Antonio has proven in a broken system that you still can have change, that you still can have victories, that you still can have the
Beauty and good food and fun and pleasure and joy and nature and, you know, relationships to land and each other in different ways. Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us about
I'm very proud of my body of work for sure.
tell us about this picture, Antonio.
Yeah, so this is my neighborhood was all houses. It's all small, 30-foot by 100-foot, or what is that, like 33 meters by 3 meters, or no, 10 meters. So really small lots for my whole neighborhood. And behind my house I grew up, there was like houses that I saw go into the ground, over years of like poverty, bank stuff. And basically, like, we just took over these lots. There was 2.5 houses on these 5 lots, and we worked with the city while talking shit to Duggan. We were still working with his managers and good people in the city, and Raquel and folks, to like clear the lots, clear the land. That's a row of asparagus behind us there, some strawberries and stuff in front of us, and that's an annual sort of production space that I'm growing in behind my house in these open lots. They were, again, like kind of taken by the banks. Families were there, taken by the city government, and we took them from them. We just asked the neighbors permission, so we're squatting on this space.
And there's a lot of this. Detroit has a lot of spaces which have been reclaimed by community, and urban farming is done nowhere more interesting than Detroit.
We have big plans for this space. It's going to be something to see in a couple of years.
That's amazing. I think we did. Do you know of a company that does tours? Someone that does tours in Southwest Detroit?
There's definitely a number of people. There's like some mural tours that are really good.
Airbnb experiences. I think you should do one.
Hanan has done some of those. I should do some of those. I have like 40 hives in the area, so I could do it. I could easily do like a bee tour.
You should do a few Airbnb experiences.
I think I might start doing some things, like some ticket items. You got to pay like $50, come take a bee tasting tour or some shit like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I should do that. Like that's one of my big issues. Is like I'm good at making money. I make money for sure, but it's not like I could be better at it. I could be more organized around making money and doing public things like that. I'm getting there. Yeah. I do a lot of stuff for free, though,
Yeah, but if you organize some sort of a tour that schools can relate to, then you'll totally have a flow of students coming, exploring Southwest Detroit.
This is one of the things I'm doing with Southwest Grows now. Like my house, I'm trying to turn it into a nonprofit that offers like stuff like that, does art in the community, education, stuff like that. Yeah.
All right, believe it or not, we're almost out of time. We haven't even gotten to any of the questions.
So we gotta do a rapid fire.
And we haven't, and I haven't had this before, by the way. Never.
Really?
Yeah, but
you gotta interview cooler people, man.
It's overdue. It's just that there's so much, and there's so much more. I have a full paper here, but I can't even touch it. But we definitely are going to have more meetings, Antonio.
Yeah,
I believe in that more than writing on Facebook, because you can't hear a person.
I love conversations, and I think podcasts are great. So I appreciate what you're doing here.
Thank you. I'm just gonna pick a few questions that I feel can most relate to. If you were a policymaker, this is Shada Sbeta from California. She's originally from Libya. If you were a policymaker during COVID-19 pandemic, what kind of
Oh
policy would
shit.
you
I would radically increase testing. I think that's like one of the big things that's like a big fear issue is like everybody just doesn't know if they have it or if they're sharing it. Like it's like a big problem. So the uncertainty is a big problem. Like you have to increase testing. But oh gosh, I mean there's so many.
Is free testing a myth? Because I feel it's a myth.
I feel like it is, and I feel like there are places. I just don't know.
It's $300 to do the test.
I'm just glad I'm not a politician. Honestly, like I'm really happy that I'm not a politician. Like, it was. This is. I'm not like the biggest Duggan fan, but his experience like privatizing the DMC gave him a pretty good understanding of like what hospital systems need to do to prepare for crises. So I have to give him some props. He's a decent manager. I like don't tell anybody I said that, but he's a really smart guy. He's definitely not an idiot, but he just works for the wrong team, you know.
I feel him wanting to do good can eventually line up with because Detroit takes also a special kind of a person to really engage in the community and get in touch with the real needs of the people there.
Yeah, I don't feel like I would never describe him as that, but he's definitely done good at, like using the moment for X, Y, and Z. I mean, a lot of Dan Gilbert's been put on big time. I mean, and downtown's popping right now. The house, like within the neighborhoods, we're all appreciative of the houses coming down.
Antonio,
That's not him though.
what do you need when you need to heal yourself? What do you do?
Forest or swimming. Sometimes running when I'm like really motivated, but I'm inconsistent.
Hadi asks, what's the worst thing COVID-19 pandemic made you discover about yourself?
Oof. The worst thing I had to really sit there and think about that one. I mean,
what's the best
my
thing?
extroversion is a problem. Like I was really, really depressed for the first like 4 or 5 weeks. And also like I had all these plans with my students and like a whole program, it all dropped and like I couldn't even like it was
Did
horrible.
that free you to do something else?
Huh?
Did that free you to do something else?
Oh, of course.
What
Yeah.
did you
So
do with
much. Like fixing things in my house, like spending more time in nature. Yeah. So I mean the Sugarbush, I was like in the middle of the Sugarbush when all this stuff started. So I was like in there, like and it was cool because everything else was canceled.
What's the best thing COVID-19 pandemic made you discover about yourself?
I fasted all of Ramadan. And it was I really loved it. It really pulled me out of the blues. Honestly, it like made me feel so good to like have a schedule. Like I kind of like lost. That was one of the worst things I discovered myself. If I'm like free wielding, my schedule will go awry. I will be working all night, and
Did you
it's
have
bad. I was
iftar?
like,
Did you have iftar
huh?
with Muslim neighbors? Did you
Yeah,
have iftar? That's the best part, man.
yeah. And I have some really really good Muslim friends,
That's the
like
best part.
lifelong friends, and I had some iftar with them. It's like there's a small pool of people I would like. It's like having iftar like it's. I mean, people are always visiting each other, and people still did. In the middle of the pandemic, families were coming together, and it was like beautiful. And I don't know, it's tough, like
Yeah, we
especially when you're
can.
all like eating that
Ramadan, we
Yemeni
can.
like
Yeah.
bread and uh
Yeah.
gravy, like you're all sharing germs.
Agreed. Yeah, we can't. Like in Ramadan, I had to see my parents. It's just we've never had a Ramadan without each other. But we kept, as much as we can. I have
Yeah.
a question here by a physicist from Germany, Sami Abdullah. At times of crisis such as this, do you prefer authoritarianism to ensure public safety or stick to democracy and liberalism?
Oh,
Asking
what a
the,
good question.
asking the wrong guy.
The thing is, like, okay, so more broadly, if I could wave a wand and like make a lot of changes to our society for the better, it like it would be very tempting to bypass the democratic process to like rapidly increase the progress of the United States, like get us back on track. I mean, like, fuck, like why are we turning the auto industry into making like national trains? Why are we watching China lead the way in trains? Like, we should be doing this. We should be doing this across the world like they are. I mean, the United States is turning inward at a really interesting time. It's a really interesting time. I don't know, but we're behind. We're behind. I
We're
mean,
very behind.
Shenzhen is the capital of technology in the world. That Macau, Shenzhen area,
Right.
like that is the future. And like, what do you think we're gonna unseat that? I mean, I don't know. It's getting crazy. China's got a lot of challenges though. A lot of. I don't even get me started on geopolitics, bro. That's my favorite topic. That's my number one passion. I read and watch and consume way too much material because like I'll be working in the farm, I'll be working with bees, I'll be working with my hands in the garden, and I just listen to that stuff for hours. Geopolitics and economic stuff.
Okay, I want to get a few recommendations before we end. What book do you recommend, Antonio?
I have to go back to that question though real quick.
Okay.
I wish we had democracy. Okay, I wish we had democracy, and I would say like if we had an educated populace, if we didn't like have the United States is a backwards country that's like 50 like just oh my god, people don't believe in evolution. People believe the world is 6,000 years old. Like the United States is a backwards country, and like we've made our education system just good enough for us to like work old industrial jobs that don't exist anymore, and we're not really like. I mean, there are pockets where critical thinkers are being created, but it's very few, and it's mostly within the upper class. And it's the United States is so we can't have a democracy. All I'm saying is like we have an idiocracy, oligarchy, whatever thing going on. So I don't know. Like in times like these, like I'm happy I'm not in China. That's for sure, though. I'll you know, like it's Hong Kong is one that like sticks out for me as like a oh god, like I kind of it's like they're all like nationalistic for America and Britain, which makes me so uncomfortable.
That's changing as we speak.
I mean, there's definitely elements within the Hong Kong people who are leftists for sure, but like that, like in their liberation struggle in their minds, like they're obviously working with the CIA. Like obvious, it's like it's just part of U.S. geopolitics. Like China supports Black Lives Matter, just like we support Hong Kong, Tibet, and Uyghurs. It's just part of like every enemy country supports the human rights of the ethnic internal minorities of those other countries. Like that's just the name of the game. It's just uncomfortable, you know, seeing a lot of those activists like come and hang out with the right-wing fascist people here in the US because those are the ones most likely to fund their revolution. You know, it's icky. It's really icky.
Okay.
Everybody loves the Dalai Lama for a reason. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, let's get to your recommendations.
I'm curious. This question section is really good, though. Is there any other gems in there for you?
There
are the favorites.
I'll give you a funny one. Amr Zahar, you know Amr Zahar?
Yeah, loosely. I think like I've met him a couple times, but I don't like know him.
What food reminds you of your childhood?
What reminds me of my childhood?
What food reminds you of your childhood?
Oh, arroz con pollo. Like I would hate the dish growing up so much because my mom would make it often, but it's like a Puerto Rican dish and she'd make it so good. Now I love it, and it reminds me of like being frustrated at the limited food options in my house.
Let me write it down. Can you spell it for me?
ARROZ space CON space POLLO. It just means rice and chicken.
Okay.
Rice with chicken.
So if someone sees the recording later, wants to try it.
For Ahmed Zahid, it's like our magluba, I think is what they call it. It's like our version of that. Yeah.
I want to get some recommendations from you, Antonio. A book that you recommend.
A book?
Yes.
So I've just been reading The Entrepreneurial State by Margaret Makazi. Is it right here? Mariana Mazzucato. I just started it like the other day and bought it. I bought it. It's been sitting on the shelf for a while, but it's like debunking the myth that like the private sector like drives business forward. It's actually mostly government and military investment.
What's the name of the book again?
It's called The Entrepreneurial State: Debunking Public versus Private Sector Myths by Mariana Mazzucato. I'm gonna ramble off a bunch of economists that people should be reading. So Ha-Joon Chang, Hajoon Chang, Chang, Chang. He's like wrote this book called Kicking Away the Ladder, and it's so good. It's a critique of like the way imperialism kind of comes into economic policies and like rational liberalism. It's good. He's really great. I like classic stuff like David Harvey is really good. But I love economics. I could dork out about this all day. I think a book that every Metro Detroiter should read is Origins of the Urban Crisis. That's like a necessity. You got to read that. You won't understand like the way things came to be the way they are. It's like every kid in Metro Detroit should read that book, because like if otherwise you're left with narratives of like anti-Black narratives, like, oh, these kids are like poor crackhead mothers on welfare and they need to lift themselves by their bootstraps. Get stuck on that Ayn Rand craziness. I mean, but it's not in the curriculum in a lot of places for reasons.
Mm-hmm. All right, I placed that in the comments.
Yeah, Empire's Workshop is another good one. I mean, there's so many good ones about like U.S. imperialism. That's kind of like how like it's a book that looks at the way we counterinsurgency in Latin America was practiced and siphoned and hardened, so the United States was ready to do counterinsurgency in the Middle East. Empire's Workshop by Greg Grandin. Super good book.
Awesome. Thank you for the multiple recommendations.
Yeah.
Film. What's the last
1491. Last one, 1491. Read that one. That's good. It's about like the scale and complexity of indigenous life in America. That one really impacted me. Film. The most recent movie I saw was Casino. I still somewhat like some of those like old mob classics. Yeah. It's like as a kid growing up, and my friend had never seen them, and I was like, you gotta watch this one. Like it's like a classic. But like my favorite like movie I think people should recommend for the cinematography or whatever is like City of God. It's a Brazilian film.
Right.
Put that one up there. City of God. It's so good. It's translation. It's like originally done in Brazilian, so you got to read the script on the bottom. But there probably is some voiceover ones. It's like a Brazilian gangster movie from the 1990s, like 70s and 60s, 80s. It's good. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. And is there any website that you want our audience?
The Intercept. It's Glenn Greenwald, and Jeremy Scahill, and they are amazing. If you like want to know what's really going on, like they're the ones who are taking over for like, we gotta like send our love out there to what's my man's creepy guy? Julian Assange,
Yes.
Like they're like kind of like taking on the reins of like collecting that sort of like privacy data. Like they're really good. I love The Intercept. That's one of my favorites.
Awesome. Thank you. And finally, is there any music that you stumbled upon and you want to share with us?
Lately, I've been listening to this song called Too Fast by this guy named Sander. Is the name. And if you're a Metro Detroit person, like Jay Dilla, you gotta listen to Jay Dilla and Slum Village. It's just like a classic, super important. Like Jay Dilla is your favorite producer's favorite producer. Like he soulful stylings, like mixing old school funk into like hip hop, and he's a producer.
You spell his name?
J space Dilla, Dilla, Jay Dilla. And the group he was part of was Slum Village, SLUM Village, VILLAGE. So that was like his like hip hop group he was a part of, but he's also an independent DJ. He's worked with Common, Erica Bud, like a bunch of the like kind of like neo soul classic people. Great, important one.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Antonio.
Yeah,
we went over about 20 minutes. I want to thank you for your time.
For sure.
It was a great episode, and I'm proud to feature one of Detroit's heroes. Really.
No, thanks, man. It's a lot of people who do really good work here, man. Like
a lot of people like you, Antonio.
There's a lot of people.
I know.
There's a lot of people. There's like people like me all over the city.
I've seen that, and I've seen also that they never get recognized or appreciated. So I want to show appreciation to you.
Oh, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
One day, Detroit will appreciate this figure.
I get so much love from the city. I'll be honest, man. People like run for office. I'm like, why? Why would I ever run for office? It's terrible. I love what I do. I'm lucky.
Awesome, man. Keep going the good things that you're doing. Dearborn
Thank you.
Blog is your platform if you want to put any announcements, and I can put you an admin on it, honestly. Please use it as much as you want. And thank you for being with us. We'll definitely host you in upcoming episodes about different topics.
Yeah,
Have a great night. Stay safe, Detroit.
for sure.
And see you in the next episode. Thank you.